Okay, students, friends, guests, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started tonight. After tonight, we only have two more lectures, one on April 2nd, and our final Shark Tank night is really one of our most exciting events, and that's the last Wednesday of the series. That is April 9th. So we've got 5 really remarkable new startup companies that are student companies here at Utah State that will be pitching to some judges and potential investors. And so that's our last evening on April 9th. What we want to do right now before we introduce Steve and his family is we'd like 3 people to come up and tell us one thing you learned from Lindsay Hadley last time. And we have a book for each of you, Main Street Entrepreneur, How to Build a Small Business. And Sid is going to pick 3 of you to come on up. Tell us one thing that you learned from that great lecture. All right. Yay. Okay, come on up. Don't be shy. All right. Fantastic. Okay, give us your name and one thing you learned from Lindsay that you really liked, and then we'll give you the book, okay?
My name's Lydia. One thing I loved that I learned from Lindsay is that you grow through experience, and you have to experience the failures and the hardships and the shortcomings in order to grow into your true potential.
My name's Nellie, and one thing I learned from Lindsay, I really liked when she said if something isn't working, to pivot and go a different route.
I'm Zyla, and one thing I like that she said is talking about getting behind others so they get behind you and finding ways to serve others.
Let's give him a hand. Thank you for being brave. I was very impressed with Lindsay Hadley that she would come and spend the evening with us after working with people like Ben Affleck and Matt Damon and being on Richard's Private Island. She knows everyone in that film industry and has kind of reinvented a way to do film that is very successful. Tonight we have another very special speaker. Our speaker tonight is Steve Palmer. Steve received his bachelor's degree here from Utah State University in Business Administration and Management. He then went on and got an MBA at Notre Dame University. He also went to Harvard and got a certificate, a program in owner-president management. But the thing that he's most known for is that he is the founder, one of the co-founders of Thrive Foods. And he's grown that into a very successful company that takes high-value nutrients, products, and freeze-dries those products. And he's built a company that is really the envy of the industry, one of the best in the world. And we're excited to have him here tonight to speak. We also take one entrepreneur each year, and we give them the Entrepreneur of the Year Award, someone that we think is a perfect role model for you, our students. And so we're going to honor Steve tonight with that award, the Entrepreneur of the Year Award. And we'd like Steve to come up here on the stage and join me. And we also would like some of the most significant people in his life that probably helped him get to where he is. His mother is here. Kathy, would you come up as well? We're going to take a photo. And his wife, Amy, is here tonight. And he has 2 of his children, Tyler and Allie. And Allie has just been accepted as a student at Utah State next year in the Huntsman Scholars Program. And then let's have Russell and Andy come up. And is our dean, Doug Anderson. I think he had to leave. But we want to thank Steve for the example that he's been, the role model that he's been. He loves Utah State. He even has a USU room in his home still. Is that right? Sure. And he was the student body president here when he was a student here. So let's give him a big hand, and we're going to do a photo quick, and then he'll speak. So if you want to hold that up, we'll do a picture. A couple pictures. Okay, thank you. You're going to love Steve's story. You're going to see why he was chosen as the Center for Entrepreneurship's Entrepreneur of the Year. So, Steve Palmer.
Wow. When I was a student here at Utah State, I never foresaw this day happening. I was sitting in lots of classes just like this and feeling like I had this interest in being a business owner someday. Hopefully I can give you a little bit of my story and give you some of the things that I did wrong in some ways and some of the things that we got right. But I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Dean Anderson, Mike Glauser. I mean, the university and especially the Huntsman School, where it is on the map, I keep hearing about this big, hairy, audacious goal of becoming the best business school in the Intermountain West. I think that they've long surpassed that. I really believe that's where Utah State already resides, and I feel quite honored to have a degree from this school. So thank you for letting me be here today. Well, you've met some of the Palmers. Here's the family. There's 7 of us. A few of us aren't here tonight. We decided who to bring, and these were the 2 that we decided to bring. We live down in Utah County, right in the heart of Cougar Country, and we fly an Aggie flag all year round. And thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I'll tell you, there was that one of the neighbors told me they were going to take it down, so the flag now has a lock on it, so they have to get on the roof. I don't think they'll ever get it. So this is my license plate. It's been my license plate since I left. Yeah. Yeah. And Amy and I, we met here. Amy's from Preston, Idaho, and we met here in student leadership. And walking through campus, every bit as nostalgic as I thought it would be being here again today. This is home for us, and hopefully someday it really will be. We really love it here. And then I was going to embarrass her, but the dean already did. My daughter, Allie, we're so proud. Just got accepted to be a Huntsman Scholar, and we're excited about her journey. It's really strange to be a father now of somebody who's about to start that long 4-year process, but we're excited to have kids now that are going to school. Well, I have to tell you about my 2 grandpas. I first off know what you're thinking. How did somebody get 2 such handsome grandpas? But these are my 2 grandpas. My mom's dad, Veer Halliday, was an entrepreneur. He had a men's warehouse where he did tailoring of suits and different things in Holiday, Utah. And then my other grandfather, Roy Palmer, he actually came here for 2 semesters when it was the Utah College of Agriculture, I think is what it was called. And he was learning how to do ag business. And he just wanted to learn enough to take it back to his farming community of Snowflake, Arizona, where the Palmers come from. He didn't have a coat. If you can imagine doing a winter in Logan without a coat. I've read the story about it many times, and I love to think about my grandpa being here. They both went on to have okay businesses. The reason I bring this up is I feel like so much of the success of all of us has to do with the shoulders that we stand on. And so even though I don't think either of them would probably have felt like they were a success in their own businesses, they were both fine businesses, but I hope in some way they feel like they deserve some of the credit for the business that we have now at Thrive, because so much of our experiences come from their hard work. So I was sitting in a class not unlike this in Management Human Resource, MHR 3200 or 2500, and I wasn't great at going to class. I hate to admit that. Amy knows that, so there's no confession there. But I was in this class, and I wondered if maybe the adjunct professor was serving some sort of community service or something, because he had no interest in being there. He said, guys, I don't care if you come to this class. I'm going to talk about my business and all the ways that I failed. And if any of these stories help you over the years or over the course of this class, great. I'm going to have to test you at the end. Here's the syllabus in the book. I'm not going to talk about it at all. How's that for your intro? I didn't miss any of his classes. Every single class was filled with these great stories that he had of mistakes that he made in his business. And I thought, this is fascinating, that this guy is telling us his mistakes, that he's teaching us to embrace mistakes as a part of success. I'd never heard of such a thing. We talk about failure and mistakes in the wrong light. And so many of his stories were helping us to understand that you can't get to success unless you have these mistakes. Well, something lit a fire in me about this class. And, fun story off the record, I was able to meet him, several years later after we'd started our business, and I was able to give him the credit for really igniting that flame in me. And it's, for obvious reasons, it's something I hope to do someday. I hope to be able to be an adjunct professor, hopefully not community service based, but if we could come and teach at Utah State someday, that would be a dream come true. This is our mission. We fuel life's important moments. This is what gets me up every day, excited to come to work, is the products that we manufacture benefit people's lives. Now, we do lots of different products. You're going to learn that I have a portfolio of products. We're a platform business focused on manufacturing in the freeze-dry space. I know you've all heard of the freeze-dry industry. It's up and coming huge. It's okay if you haven't heard of it. I had never heard of it before I got into it. But this is the thing that we talk a lot about. You're going to hear me talk about culture tonight and talk about how important it is to get the culture right for a business to be successful. It just so happens that in order for us to be good at our culture, we have to have some mechanism, and so we freeze dry. We're manufacturers. Not the most exciting thing to talk about, and yet it doesn't have to be, because what we're doing with this platform is exciting to me, and it's really motivating to see how we impact lives. Hopefully, one of the tests that you could measure me off of is if I can convey to you how we keep that mission statement of fueling life's important moments. So rewind back to a time of 2003-4 in November. I decided that I could do the job better than my boss. I'm pretty sure that I could do what he's doing faster. And so my soon-to-be business partner and I, we left the business together, and we met at the Wiener Schnitzel, which, how many of you do they have Wiener Schnitzels in Logan? They probably don't, do they? I don't even know if they're in business anymore, which is maybe a bad sign. This is where the whole thing started, was at the Wiener Schnitzel. But we sat together and said, how do we build a business together, and what is it we're going to do? And it was November 1st, actually, of 2004. This is where it all started. And we created a company called Shelf Reliance. We sold shelves. That's what we did. 2004, we had a ribbon cutting and a barbecue. Only family showed up. Our dads weren't sure that we were going to make it. They were both talking to each other how to bail their sons out if that ever happened, if we failed. And I was saying to a group earlier today that both of our wives were expecting, and how I decided to walk away from insurance, I don't remember that part of the deal. But fortunately, things worked out, and we started to sell these shelves. This is what the shelf looked like. This is it. People would walk into the showroom, and we would quickly give them a cookie and a drink, and say, this is the shelf. And they would say, okay, this is a high pressure situation. Okay, well, I'll take one shelf. Eventually, we started selling these in Costco. And that really was what helped us become a little more confident in our abilities to market. And then they got into Walmart. But you could tell that this is a shelf that worked really more in the Utah food emergency preparedness space, right? This was really more in that category. But we had a patent on the shelf, and we thought that we knew what we were doing. We went to every possible carnival, fair, show. We were selling these out of our cars, they were trucks, and I was a professional carny for probably the first 2-3 years of our business, going to Costco road shows and selling and just doing anything we could to get the word out about these shelves. Eventually, we created a small pantry version of the shelf, and then Costco said, we're going to run a nationwide promotion on this. I remember my business partner and I, when we got the message that this was happening, we hugged, maybe for the first time, I don't know. It was a little awkward in the middle of the warehouse, but this was an exciting moment that we were going to start selling these shelves in pantries. And then somebody said, why aren't you selling food in these shelves? Well, because we're a shelving company. Why would we sell food? We don't know anything about food. But for some reason, we decided that we could do this. So we went to the FDA, and they trusted us with a permit to sell food, and we started putting food in cans. And we discovered there was something really cool about this food called freeze-dried food that lasted forever. It really does. It's a preservation technique that is like dehydration, but that's with heat, and this is with cold. And something about the way that the cold works allows the food to last pretty much indefinitely if stored correctly, and it preserves the taste and the quality, and it takes a lot of the moisture out, which is good for things like an application where you need something light. This is why the space industry was so into the food. We had a big blimp that we flew over the freeway. At some point, that blimp got accidentally released, and it flew away. I'd like to believe it is still somewhere in orbit. True story, the same day the highway patrol called, and I was certain we just took down an airliner, and they said they were there just recruiting for some banquet or something, and I was very relieved that we didn't cause an accident. Let me show you a building, though, that we thought, at some point we thought, okay, if we can sell freeze-dried food, we may as well manufacture freeze-dried food. Sometimes as an entrepreneur, there's bravery, and then there's maybe a little bit of ignorance. We thought we could do this. So we went all in on this idea of building a freeze-dry factory. I have the moment captured. Why this is captured, I'm glad it is, but this is the moment I signed a $17 million loan that I had no business signing, banker looking on, by the way, from Zions Bank, and deciding that we thought we could do this. Now, this was a defining moment. Now, I said this earlier to a group that we were talking to at dinner, that every 5 years or so you need to reinvent yourself as a business, which I would argue is accelerated to maybe 3 years. This was a huge change for us. Shelves, putting food in cans, why not? Let's manufacture the food. And history captures it here. Let me show you what a freeze-dry factory is. This is a little commercial about our company from a few years ago.
This is Steve. This is Jason. They both like food.
I've been eating since I was, well, little.
And you really haven't stopped.
Steve and Jason are not alone. Everyone eats, but there's a problem. In order to eat food, someone has to prepare the food.
Think about it. Who prepares the food you eat? A restaurant? A grocery store?
A nice neighbor.
Really?
But in most cases, that person preparing the food for you is Mom.
I've made over 10,000 meals in my life, but really, who's counting?
Me, I'm counting.
Moms are busy, way busy. Of all the things moms have to do every day, feeding a family is at the top of the list called things that stress mom out.
We felt like there had to be a better way. Something less stressful, but still meaningful.
There was something easier, quicker, and even healthier.
We do simple, clean food.
Steve and Jason decided to build the most state-of-the-art freeze-dry facility in the world.
Turned out pretty good.
This was a huge breakthrough. Before these guys came along, freeze-dried food was mostly found in trail mix and dry cereal. But they took freeze-drying to a whole new level.
Well, freeze drying isn't rocket science.
It kind of is.
Well, that's true. That's because we take something from a near perfect state and take it right off the vine. We lock in the taste, we lock in the nutrition, and we lock out all the bad. And that's why it's so delicious. It will literally hang out in your pantry until the night you need it.
Tonight, tomorrow night, a few weeks from now, really whenever you need it.
I just said that.
Freeze-dried food is very snackable, but the real magic with Thrive Life is in understanding how easy it is to cook with. Instead of this, you have this. And instead of this. Mom, congrats. With Thrive Life ingredients, you just made a family favorite meal in half the time. Take the rest of the night off.
I can sneak veggies in pretty much any meal. It's super awesome.
I don't even have to sneak it in. My 5-year-old snacks on broccoli.
But Steve and Jason didn't stop there.
For moms, it's not just about preparing the food.
It's thinking about what to make, making a list, finding the time to get to the store.
And so they launched Simple Plate, family-friendly meals that are planned, prepped, and ready when you are.
It's taking away the stress, but it still lets Mom get creative in the kitchen.
And maybe best of all, it's not going to spoil in a day or two or even a week or two. It's in your pantry, ready when you are.
With the introduction of Simple Plate, Thrive Life is providing ingredients and meals to families across North America, helping families have it quicker, easier, healthier, way quicker.
It's so much easier, quicker.
We're much healthier.
Quicker, easier, healthier.
A better experience.
There's a couple of fun things about that video. First off, it's 10 years old, and I talked my wife into a little cameo, which is always fun to still see. But we thought that we could take this freeze-dry concept and make it mainstay in everybody's pantry. But there was one problem. When you talk to somebody about freeze-dried food, it very quickly became weird. Like, wait, how long does it last? 30 years? Why would I want that in my pantry? And so we were going around it the wrong way. We were struggling to put it in front of people, and we had to learn. And for a while, trying to go pivot from emergency preparedness, shelving turned food company overnight, and now mainstay food, it didn't go very well. It actually, for a while, I'll show you here in a minute, but it started to actually decline. Our sales weren't going the right direction. We coined this phrase early on. I don't know which one of us did it, probably Jason. I used AI to, ChatGPT figured this out. It's going to be my next thing is this movie. But this gut-wrenching moments of impending doom. And every entrepreneur will tell you about stories they've had where the wind is just taken from them, where they just have some moment. The lows are incredibly low and the highs are really high. And there are just these moments where you realize, wow, this is an existential threat and we have got to change. And there's been moments where I have felt that I just would rather sleep in today and not sure how I'm going to face this. And very quickly you realize that's not an option. We have to get up, we have to get to work, we have to pivot, we have to figure this out. And so this has almost become a badge of honor in some ways, that every entrepreneur has these moments of impending doom, and they're really the actual reason they succeed, is this challenge that is in front of you. These obstacles actually help you to grow and to develop into what you need to become. But I remember, and I told the story to a group that was here last year, that our CFO came in after we were building this brand new $17 million building. It takes a couple of years to finally build it. The freeze dryers are being moved in. And on one day, our CFO came in and said, hey, our company's not going to make it. We've been looking at numbers that are now 2 years outdated. The market has shifted. I made a mistake in the format, and I don't think we have 6 months. He was emotional. It was a really weird moment, to think, okay, well, how do we react? He said, no, there's no way. We can't sell fruits and vegetables in these freeze dryers and be successful. There's too many people overseas that have figured this out for a lot cheaper options than we have. And I thought, okay, I knew this was going to happen. This is in 2014 or something, 15. And I came home to Amy and I told her, I think I've done it. You probably knew I was going to bankrupt the company eventually. But I don't know how we get past this one. And we had several of these gut-wrenching moments before, but this one felt insurmountable. It felt like one that we couldn't overcome. And I was watching these dryers go in to the factory and thinking, what have I done to the 150 people that work here and who trusted me? And my business partner had trusted me, and I worried about him. When you sign that $17 million, it's a personal guarantee. And maybe I didn't fully understand that when I signed it, but it becomes clear that everything's on the line. And I think we had a couple moments where we really had to sit down and take inventory of our faith and our commitment in each other. And what is it we now do to get past this? There had to be something. Now, those of you, probably all of you who are interested in starting a business, one of the qualities I think an entrepreneur has is entrepreneurs are eternal optimists, sometimes to a fault, right? There's always a way to get around the challenge. And at some point we thought, okay, let's just do everything we can. Let's start making phone calls. Let's talk to the people who sold us the freeze dryers. There was a little bit of a problem with our strategy. Our strategy was this one-legged stool concept where it was tied to emergency preparedness. And every time there was a hurricane or a change in whoever was in the White House, it would bounce. We thought that we were the ones causing our sales to increase, but it was actually a series of many geopolitical issues that were happening, and elections and Hurricane Sandy and the end of the Mayan calendar, if you remember that, if you were born back then. And I started to think that maybe we had to change, and I had not paid the price of what strategy meant. The dean and I were talking about something at dinner, and there are some great books that Porter writes about strategy and how you have to be unique and look for ways to be able to put your strategy into words and be able to talk about it. And I didn't know how to do that at all. And so I decided, look, this is what was happening. We had this high water mark where our company hit pretty good sales, and then for a couple of years it declined. And I thought, this is now, it's do or die. It's time for us to figure this out. If we're going to become the company that succeeds, we have to invest in what you've heard in business class as a blue ocean strategy, which is something that's unique, something different. Now, we had already made our bets. We already had a freeze-dry factory. It couldn't just change from that. We knew we had to at least be freeze-drying, but it had to be something different than what everybody else was doing. I got a hold of my dad, who was also a CEO. I asked him if he would start to coach me every single week, and he started coming in. A couple of times he had to remind me he was there to coach, and not listen to complaints. He taught me One of the best lessons he taught me is I was complaining one time about these problems in our business. He let me do it for whatever it was, 5 minutes, and he said, one of the things I want you to start to work on is to see complaints the other direction. These are the opportunities of your business. Rather than see the problems, see those as opportunities to grow and change. Rather than see something that's going wrong, how do you make that into a positive? And it was a mindset that I hadn't had. I was really good at pointing out problems, but I wasn't very good sometimes at turning those into opportunities. So this was one of the first big things, and he started throwing books in front of me. Books that some of you have read, 7 Habits, and I got really into strategy books, and I did go back to school. I got an MBA. I kept talking to people. But one of the things I learned is you have to have a mentor. And to this day, I still believe that having a mentor and surrounding yourself with the very best people who lift you up and help you to become a better person, that those are key to success no matter what you do, right? Whether you're just trying to be a good father and husband or a good mother, or if you're just anything you're focused on, if your goals are to run faster, who do you talk to help you do that? Who is your coach that's helping mentor you? This was one of the turning points of the company, though. As we looked for good mentors, we found this guy named Mark Harvey. Mark was living in England, and he had been working in a freeze-dry company for 20 years. And I had heard about him asking, you start to kick the bushes and ask anybody who knows, hey, do you know a consultant in the freeze-dry industry? And most people didn't. But we found this guy. And within a few weeks, he was sitting in my office, and he toured our facility, and he said, Steve, I've got good news for you. There's a way out of this. You don't have to go bankrupt. You have built a factory that can do much more than fruits and vegetables. I can show you how to do something called probiotics, and I can teach you how to do backpacking meals. Now, I'd heard of backpacking meals. There's a brand out there called Mountain House, but I didn't know a whole lot about how to manufacture. We quickly realized that this was an important guy for our future. He still works for us today, by the way. He's in our German plants, helping them become better. But Mark Harvey was one of the turning points where we started to pivot in a different direction and where things started to change, where that dip in sales started to go the other direction. But it came down to focusing on our strategy and saying, how do we have a stronger position in the market where we're not this one-legged stool, where we are actually a little bit more stable, much more stable, to where if one of the legs falls, we're not necessarily going to go down with it. And so we started to look at our business as a platform business. Now, that might sound strange for a manufacturing company to say they're a platform. It's really easy when you're talking about digital or online to say a platform business. Google is a great example, the example of a platform business, right? They've got so many tools that all build off of Google that they've been able to turn into this massive company. We thought we could do the same thing with manufacturing. As long as we had a portfolio of products that were unrelated in the industry, we could use freeze drying as our platform and then take positions in different markets that were unrelated. I'll tell you about some of those markets here in a minute. But this became like our Everest challenge. Like we wanted to become something great, something big. And I really believe, and you'll see one of our values is that we set big goals as a company. What is it that really just challenges us and seems almost impossible that we just know is going to just take every ounce of energy to be able to pull off? I used to want to climb Mount Everest. I don't know how serious I got. I'd like to believe it was a midlife crisis idea I had. I told Amy, only 2% die that do it. That sounds really good to an entrepreneur, 98% success rate. And she said, you're never going to be able to do that. Someday, maybe base camp. But we decided, let's create a goal. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? And we created this idea. Now, this has changed over the years. At one point, it was 3 years to become a $700 million company with a 20% EBITDA. It's been updated. That was 3 years ago. And now, by the end of 2027, we want to be $1 billion in revenue. And when we talk about this, I remember when we introduced this to the leadership team, eyes were wide. Wow, that is a huge goal. How are we going to do that? And one of the things that I don't love to hear from my team, they could tell you this, is we can't do that, or it's impossible, or, I mean, how many times has somebody been more encouraged when they hear that type of language? And they know that's just motivating to me. So this is our current goal that we're focused on. Now, to do that, we've taken on 2 different paths. Organic growth is your own sales, right? So our lines are growing year over year. We're pushing them to do double-digit growth. And then you have inorganic growth, which is the mergers and acquisition space. And this was an interesting part of our phase in our career, only the last 5 years or so that we've been doing this, looking around the industry saying, are there pieces of the industry that would make us even stronger if we were collectively working together? Our company in American Fork was focused on probiotics, focused on backpacking meals, things that we could do really well. But as we looked around, there were a lot of companies that were doing different things. Now, you can't just go and buy a bunch of companies, put them together and say, we've done it, that's the goal. You end up with something like this that ultimately nobody wants to buy because it doesn't really show a lot of strategy in it. So we were more deliberate. We talked to lots of different companies, every company in our industry. You know, surprisingly, there are, I don't know if there's 100 freeze-dried companies out there, but we started to acquire all these different companies over the course of the next few years. And each one had a different reason of why it was strategic to us. One of them was doing fruits and vegetables in a way that we couldn't do them in American Fork. Another one was doing proteins in New York. We had one that was really good at probiotics in Germany. Another one doing herbs in Peru. Now, that's not one we had even thought of yet. But as we looked at increasing those legs to the stool and saying we're a platform business, we're focused on different industries, if you think about the pet space, there's not a lot tied to the pet space and, say, the probiotic space. They're very different industries now. The economy, the macro side of the economy, yes, it has a change. The tide definitely impacts everybody. But these industries specifically are not necessarily tied together, and they helped us to be generally much more successful and stronger as a business as we started to acquire. The next big thing we did, I talked about Mark Harvey. He's the gentleman second to the left. But we found other great talent in the industry. I'm 100% sure we have recruited the best talent. One that I'll talk about, the guy on the far right, his name is John Olsen. He looks like an angry Viking. He is from Denmark. And the guy, the first time I met him, he built our first plant. He was tied to the equipment factory or a company that was building our freeze dryers. And he said, I don't think I've ever seen a plant this bad since I was in Israel a few months ago. And I was like, who are you? I immediately wanted to fight him. I was so upset that he would come in and say this. A few years later, he came in to warn us for buying from a competitor. His company had sent him to come and say, hey, these guys are buying from a competitor. We need to tell them we may not use them again. And I said, John, are you happy in your job? Is there any chance you'd come work for me? And he's our vice president of engineering now. He left the company that had sent him to threaten us. And so I think recruiting the best talent, even though some of these people seemed a little bit off limits to us, they were the reason that we continued to succeed. They knew more about the industry than I did and continued to build opportunities. We knew we needed to also build some new growth. We needed a flagship company. We decided to plant one right in the middle of Wisconsin in Oak Creek outside of not far from Milwaukee. And this was meant to be the showpiece where we take our customers and say, this is what freeze dry is. It's the state of the art. It's this, I don't know. You know, we try to show them, give them opportunities to tour around and see what these freeze dryers do. This is an exciting way to get people excited about what the opportunities could be, and we knew that this would be central to our strategy. This just was commissioned at the end of last year, and it now has 14 dryers, and it does probiotics, confection, which is a really fancy word for candy, and it also does some pet treats. This is what our global footprint looks like now. The green are the actual freeze-dry facilities. The blue are the distribution points, and the orange are co-mans that we work with in Asia and Northern Africa that help us to also manufacture outside of the space that we do. Remember, I told you there were people who do really good things with strawberries, for example, that we just can't do in the States, and so we utilize some of these other co-manufacturers to do this. This is important for a couple reasons. When we set out to be the Everest of freeze-dry, and we wanted to become big, it wasn't just so we could put our flag at the top of it and say, we did it. It has more to do with our abilities to be able to look at the network and then pivot and flex depending on where the market's changing. Right now, it's a really dynamic market. On April 1st, so what is that, next Tuesday, the new tariffs go into effect. We have a plant up in British Columbia that's going to be subject to tariffs of 25%. We were able to pivot, and we're now moving some of those products into the States, and that company, that plant, will now focus just on our Canadian business. This allowed us to have the ability to pivot when we required to. It also helps us from a standpoint of a smaller footprint, and how do we maximize our supply chain and really lessen the time to customer and cut the energy cost out of transportation. Think about what we used to do. We would buy strawberries that came from Chile. We would slow boat them to a factory where they were freeze dried, and then they'd go to another factory where they were put into packaging, and then back to a distribution center. The goal now is to grow them in Egypt. They're then freeze dried in Egypt. Ideally, we now take 10% of the entire crop of Egypt for export on strawberries. So that becomes hard to find freeze dryers that can do that much. But a lot of it stays in the region. It can be packaged there, and if we're lucky, we can sell it there. And that's sometimes a challenge. But it does allow us to maximize our supply chain. So what that allows is now we have started to work with farmers. We now, in some cases, we're working with farms where we have leased the land, and we are able to put agro-engineers into those areas and help us with pesticides and help us with irrigation techniques. I mean, these are people who know a lot more than I know about this, but we've been able to taste the exact strawberries in the field in Egypt that are now in our drinks here and some of our customers in the States. Same thing in Peru. This is a parsley field. I'm sure you've all been in a parsley field, but I was able to go and cut parsley here. A lot of these are agro-engineers down there. It's then washed and then freeze-dried just a few miles down the road from this exact location, and then it gets put into bottles where it could be sold. So just examples of how this network that we've built has allowed us to maximize our profitability and decrease the amount of energy that goes into the products. Okay, let me just spend a minute talking about our Thrive brands, and then I want to talk about culture. We love that we have some of our own brands. We have some pet treats and snacks, and I'll just fly through some of these. We have a backpacking line. If you've ever tried any backpacking meals, this is one that was developed right here in Utah. It's one of our passion projects. We absolutely love backpacking in Utah, and my kids that are here actually tasted some really bad backpacking meals when we first started. It's gotten better. Let's see, I'll skip that. And we also do some co-manufacturing, which is a big part of who our company is today. So we work with companies like Trader Joe's. This one will pass by if you've ever had a pink drink. We are the pink in that drink. That was a moment where my daughter thought I was cool in an airport when she learned that. Maybe just for a few minutes I was cool, that she found out the Starbucks drink was one that Dad was working on. We do functional products like probiotics, and we do a lot of really innovative products with the pet world. So you can see these are all very different markets, right? They're very different. So if something changes with the pet world, it probably won't have impact on the probiotic space, but it allows us to maybe take a larger position if something does happen to that industry. We also do something with confection. If you've tasted this product, it was manufactured by our company. This is the coolest picture I own. Every one of those bags is filled with about 1,800 pounds of Skittles. There's a lot of dust in freeze-drying Skittles. Sometimes I wonder if I'll be, 20 years from now watching late night TV and I'll see one of those class action lawsuits. Do you have Skittle lung? You might be entitled to a class action settlement. But it is a great smelling plant. I'll tell you, if you want to work in a plant, you'd rather be here than the pet treat plant. It's not even close. This is our current company overview. So we're now 2,500 employees and in a few different countries, which has changed how we manage our culture. Culture is what I want to end with and talk about. Our values, and these, I think, if there's anything you learn, this is what I hope you remember some of the mistakes I've made and you won't repeat those, to always measure twice and cut once and those types of things. But integrity is what every company says they have, but it's a one and done. You have one chance with your customers, and once you've burned that bridge with integrity, you'll never get their trust back. We work really hard to define what integrity means, that it's about transparency, it's about working together, it's about understanding expectations and managing those expectations. The next one I think is very much related, that we treat people well. It doesn't matter if they're suppliers, vendors, customers, employees, anybody. We have to take good care of our relationships because, again, once you've shown your cards and you're not going to be somebody, especially in a stressful moment, that's not going to work with a customer or a vendor when things get hard, They learn from that. And employees want to work with a company that values who they are and knows they're going to take good care of them. We work hard to get things done. Every business has to be nimble enough to get done what matters, right? There's lots of projects. Every day I come into work and say, what are the 3 things I have to do? I write them on a sticky note, or I've got a little board now that I write them on, and I try to check them off. Many days I don't get them all done, but at least I focus on it as best I can. We win together. It doesn't matter if you're the guy washing the freeze dryers or the one buying the products to go in those dryers. We care about winning together and having each person on the team see their involvement. Kaizen, if you're in manufacturing, we get better and better. We're continually improving and focusing on, perfection is never a destination, but just an endless journey. And then this last one, we chase big goals. This is Roger Bannister, who crossed the 4-minute mile marker, and I love this picture. He would wish there was a different picture of his moment, I think, because this isn't the most flattering picture, but he did something that unlocked minds across the world. What was impossible up until this moment in time, 13 people did the next year, because all of a sudden they realized we can do this. We can run the 4-minute mile. And so we talk about this, that it's sometimes so much in our minds that we think we can't do things. And the truth is, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you absolutely can. It doesn't mean you have to have an IQ of whatever or a work ethic of whatever. Like, it just comes down to grit, determination, knowing who you are, and being willing to drive for big goals. I think that's what he did for us by teaching us that. We call all those values the Thrive Way. That's how we make good decisions. Now, let me just end with one thing. I don't want to skip past this, but we currently take a lot of water out of products. That's what we do. Nothing too exciting about it. And a lot of people say, well, how do you put this back into the world? How do you recycle that water? One of our plants will do 18,000 gallons a day. It's a really hard task to figure out how to clean that water and put it back. In some plants, I'm sure could do it. But we've decided that we would take this idea that we can take a drop of water and we can put it back into communities. Kenya is one of the places that we focus on where we can find these water projects where we build reservoirs. We don't build them. We find great companies that do this for us. But we find these places that have been for centuries going from water hole to watering hole, which seems crazy to think there are so many places left that still have this problem. But we build reservoirs that can allow them to stay within their community, and then their children don't have to wander from watering hole to watering hole. They can go to school, which is something that has been really exciting for us to see. My kids are going to go see this summer. Quick lessons that I've learned. Guys, I have a lot to learn still. I'm not going to stop learning. I'll tell you that embracing failure and letting yourself, being patient with yourself and not giving up the first time you don't hit that 4-minute mark is such a part of being an entrepreneur. You have to have a short-term memory. Remember the hard things so you don't repeat them, but be okay with falling and stumbling. Having mentors, knowing who you are, what's your true north, and then staying true to those values will have probably one of the most lasting impacts on your success. Making those big goals happen, and of course, never stop learning. And then measuring. We have a scorecard every single week. We look at it as a team. We say, what did we do well? What did we do wrong? And how do we get better at that? I want to just tell you a quick story. This guy on the left was my best friend here at Utah State. His name is Gary Marlowe. He was a political science major here, and he went on to fly F-15s. He was a commander over a base up in Mount Home, Idaho. And not too long ago, he retired from a very decorated career. He was President Obama's military aide. He worked with the Joint Chiefs. And he said something at his retirement in Washington, D.C. at the Naval College that I will never, ever forget. It was the most poignant moment of my last 10 years. He said this, don't confuse what you do with who you are. And I think that is advice that I needed. That has helped me redefine my career and realize, you know what? It's not about the accomplishments. It's not about the businesses. It's what we do in those businesses. And the titles that do matter are not CEO. It's dad, it's brother, it's husband. And those are the titles that will ultimately determine the success that we have and how we treated people as a good friend, as good friends. And as I think about all the titles that I have, I am definitely very proud of the title of being Aggie. Don't ever forget how valuable that is and the value of your education here and at the business school, because it will forever bless your life. And I just wish you well in your journey. I'm grateful for a chance that I've had to come and talk to you, and I'll be around here to answer a few questions. Just a few books that I like to read if you want to take a look at them. And with that, I think I open it up to some questions, right? Just like the 10-second rule, like I sit down after 10 seconds. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
How do you, because I've heard it's important, you talk a lot about like continually optimizing and changing. How do you learn from your failures while also being willing to like try things again and like keep going at something? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Sometimes I have examples of moments where I've gone too far. I've taken too big of a risk. And you've heard this saying, probably fail fast, fail cheap. So when you are going to take that risk, it has to be something you're willing to lose, right? How far into the market are you willing to go? If you're going to roll the dice and say the whole company hinges on this crazy idea of freeze dry, I made that mistake, right? I'm lucky that it worked out. We don't do that anymore. We measure things and then we understand why they're working. It can't just be something that you continue to invest in and not be able to measure or control the outcome in. And so I think measuring what didn't work is as important as what did work. And sometimes I think I forget the what did work. You get to where you're almost focused on the 3-4% that didn't work. And I think that the tendency is to not celebrate the big wins with the team. I definitely struggle with that sometimes and not celebrating. But I think it's being uber focused on those moments where it doesn't work and saying why didn't it work and how do we change that next time, and not ever condemning somebody for failing, right? I remember one time this guy was driving our forklift. He hit a sprinkler main for the fire riser in our building, and within a matter of seconds there was like 18 inches of water in our entire factory. It was a moment, right? Everybody's got squeegees and cleaning and the water's going out in the streets and the fire department shows up. Hey, why did he was really embarrassed. And I put my arm around him and said, it's okay. You'll never do that again, I promise. No big deal. And he was so embarrassed. But you have to be okay with failure. Now, that's maybe a comical example, but people are going to take risks in the company, and we have to be okay with them not succeeding, because that ends up being probably one of the greatest reasons they'll stay with you down the road, because you treated them so well when they failed, and they learned from it. Yes?
With having so many different places all around the world, how do you stay connected with them and making sure that like you're all on the same path?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I tend to go to places where there's need, right? Where there's a focus is required for whatever reason. I think at this point, this is where you start to talk about the culture. And getting your arms around that culture, especially when you're talking about different cultures from country to country, is not always easy, right? The culture itself in the country becomes a challenge sometimes. The best way we do this is we focus on management training, leadership training. Leadership is, I think we live in a world where leadership is it's a diminishing quality. Like, there is such a starving need in this world for good leaders who will stand up. And I'm not talking business leaders. I just think any leader, somebody willing to do good things and put their hand up and say, I can fix this. And so finding those people who share that same passion for culture and leadership, your hope is you can train them and teach them the Thrive way, right? These are our values. This is what matters, that they're going to make those good decisions when the time comes. There has to be an immense amount of trust. I haven't been to the Peru plant for about a year. I have a great manager there that I know gets our culture and is helping to espouse those same values that we have here in American Fork. So much of it is just trust. And then when there's a moment where there's a problem or a challenge, that's when I'll go there and I'll focus on hopefully a training issue or finding ways to encourage the team. But I think that's becoming more and more rare as our company matures. Good question.
You said that about every 3 to 5 years you have to reinvent the business. So when doing that, I feel like there's kind of 2 routes you can take. I could be way wrong here, but it's either like refining an existing process or reinventing the process. So how do you make the call, I guess, between those 2?
Between reinventing a process or refining a process? That is a really good question. So I think so much of it is understanding what is the need you're trying to fix, right? If you're looking at the consumer, whether that be a business or a customer, an end consumer, an end user, you're solving some sort of a problem. Problems change over time. So originally when we built Peak Refuel, we decided that we'd go in double the price of our competitor. But the problem that we knew we were solving is that anyone who's out, let's say on a bow hunt or on a 5-day trip, they're probably okay to pay an extra $5 for a meal in order to be at their best performance. The need there was somebody who cared about their nutrition, who cared about calories and sodium in some cases, right? Because they're these high endurance athletes. We knew we were solving that problem, that when they end up getting into the backcountry, they wanted food that could actually sustain them and fuel their important moment, right? That was the need that we saw when we did that. Now, that won't always be the need. That may change. Our competitor may all of a sudden say, me too, we're going to do the same thing. And all of a sudden that need changes. So I think so much of our pivot has to do with looking at the end user and saying, what is it we're doing that's better than the next competitor? How are we different, and looking for the blue ocean opportunities and not just duplicating what somebody else is doing and racing to the bottom on price? Does that make sense?
You mentioned like writing your top 3 priorities for the day on a sticky note. What are some of your other daily habits that help you run this business?
Daily habits. I love, there's a great newsletter that I get. If you want to write down my email and send it to me, I'll be happy to forward it to you, because I can't remember who does this. It's a leadership email that comes every single morning. It's the first thing I read. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but I do it every single day. And there's these nuggets, these wisdom, these tried and true principles of reminders of what matters. They don't change. One of them that recently I read said, the leader's job is to always be positive. No matter what's happening, or no matter what the challenge is, I have to stay positive in the face of stress and these moments of crisis, these moments of existential threats. I'm positive. To read that, maybe it comes every year, the same type of message, is helpful for me. So one of the things that I do is I'm constantly trying to remind myself of principles and values that are tried and true. So I think as long as I continue to learn, I continue to develop and enhance and master these skill sets that are important as a leader, that just like a company has to change over time, I think leaders have to change. If you just become stagnant as a leader, at some point you will be outgrown, you'll be passed up by the competition. So I think that's one of the most important things, is I'm always learning. I think another thing that I love to do, I think this probably came from that same email, I try to send an accolade really early in the day. I try to send some sort of an email or a phone call or a text to somebody on my team who did something that I thought was value specific, extraordinary, and I give them kudos for that. That's another one of my habits that I like to do. And over time, you do find that most of what you have is your style of leadership is this collection of habits that you do every day. But those are definitely 2 that I do still.
Talk about the importance of having a mentor. How would you recommend that we as college students go about doing that?
Yeah, this might surprise you. You can go to, I think so much of us are worried about being turned down that oftentimes we don't try just to ask somebody, are you going to be my mentor? I think if you were to just find somebody that you think exemplifies values that you want, they might have skills that you're wishing you had, and just say, hey, I'm wondering if I could just sit down with you once a month for an hour and just coach me on some of the things I'm working on, and have somebody I could be accountable to. I think you'd be surprised how many people will say yes. It really doesn't have to cost money. You're not needing to go and pay somebody hundreds of dollars a month just to be your mentor. Find somebody you already know that's a family member, somebody that's a neighbor, somebody that's just even an old roommate or colleague, and just say, hey, I just need to start. And you'll find that at some point you'll be looking for the next mentor. And I'm not saying that you're using them and then abandoning them. These are important people in my life. I'm saying that you'll need something new depending on the situation in your life. A new skill set will need to be developed. But I just think so many of those are just people that you already know and just have to ask for help. I have done that a lot in my life. I've been surprised at how many entrepreneurs are willing to help me, including this professor I talked about. He had a dinner every single Thursday night. They still have Gio's here, or there's like an Italian restaurant down on Main Street. He'd just say, meet me there on Thursday night. I want 10 of you to sign up, and I'll just give you all of my business knowledge. There are a lot of people willing to help in the community that are already business leaders. Okay. Oh, sorry.
As you always focus on learning and continuing to grow, how do you balance also being okay with where you're at and enjoying progress?
If I'm being honest with you, remember I said I sometimes focus on the 2 or 3%. I think I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and that isn't easy. If you're going to be okay with failure, you have to be able to look at yourself and say, that's all right, right? We're going to learn from this. I think where I really get down on myself is when I make that same mistake twice, which I've done plenty of times. But I think it is constantly looking at the challenge square on, this is where I failed, and being okay with that, which sometimes takes months. Sometimes it's like a really lasting wound that you're like, how did I let this happen? And you have to be patient with yourself and give yourself some grace that this is part of your journey. It's hard to focus on the other 98%. I think that that's been difficult. Embracing success isn't one of the things you see up here, right? It's embracing failure. And I think sometimes that can give you a critical eye. And that's where I said that I'm not as good sometimes focusing on the wins of the team. This is one of the things I have to become better at as I'm growing as a leader. So definitely one of my challenges. I don't think I have the perfect answer there. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Can you speak to, I don't know if balance is the right word, but maybe succeeding in all the different roles you have in your life as a business leader, as a husband, as a father, all these other things, even when your time or attention is spread thin?
Man, that might be the most difficult question I get tonight. It is hard to balance. I was once at a lecture Senator Mitt Romney was speaking at, and somebody asked him this question, the audience, how do you find balance? And he said, I have found that when my wife, my business partners, and my colleagues at church are all mad at me at the same time because I'm disappointing them, I'm probably in balance. I think the truth is it is not easy, and the pendulum swings from time to time, and there are times where spring break is this week and the focus is going to be family, right? We're going to disconnect as best we can and try to focus on what matters. I try to be at the events that are most important to my kids. I don't miss races. I don't miss the important events. They could probably tell you if that's true later on. But it isn't easy. I think balance is definitely going to be the challenge for anybody. I don't think you have to be a business leader for this to be a challenge in life. And being able to stay true to what you say are priorities. It's funny how priorities have become plural over time. It almost doesn't make sense. What is your top priority? And then what next gets your time? That is challenging. That is something that I have to work constantly on, and there are times that the pendulum swings too far. Unfortunately, I have a good wife who says, bring it back a little bit, you're forgetting some of those important things. But yeah, I have to work on it. Thanks, everyone. Go Aggies.